In this movie, we're going to show how to create an extruded a profile that we're going to extrude by just digitizing it from this diagram, and then we're going to extrude it along an arc that's 30 7/8 in diameter, and then it's going to have a 5.5 inch length for the profile that's going to be swept around here. So the easiest way to create this is going to be to just digitize this part. And I'm going to come here to the draw polyline tool. I'm just going to line this up. Now I'm going to hold my shift key down to make my line perfectly horizontal. Again, I'm going to hold the shift key down as I go up, and I'm not going to worry about being too overly exact here. I just want to try and make it easy to draw these parts. Alright, so we're pretty close to having our piece there. Now I'm going to turn off all layers, and this is going to allow me to zoom in on here a little bit. Let's now go to the point edit mode, and I'm going to click on point editing here. Let's just drag this part up a little bit. I'm going to right click this and make this a curve. It's going to give me some handles I can use to drag this surface around. So come on, have a little bit of cleanup here, and I can always convert something from an arc to a curve if I think those extra handles will make it easier for me to fit the part, and I think in this case it will. When I do a cleanup, it's going to convert these curves back to lines and arcs, so I'm not too concerned about. We're just about done here. Okay, so that's got our shape more or less. Now let's go here. It looks like we have a little bit to trim away at the bottom down here. So I'm going to say explode these parts, and I'm going to hit trim, two boundaries, all boundaries, and that should allow me to trim away that little part. Now I'll come back and reselect all these and merge this back into a closed shape. And if I want to kind of square some of these things off, there's some tools in there that'll make that easy. See, that's a closed contour now. We're going to come in here and select this one, hold down our key, click to the outside of that line. So click there. That should allow me to remove this little end point there, and now join this back together, and that'll be a nice straight line there. And that one looks pretty good. So now I can spend as much time cleaning this contour up as I want, but this will give me the overall shape we were looking for. Now we're going to bring up the precision input center, and let's enter these values here of 5.5 by 1.5, and that looks like it's a pretty good proportion, pretty close to what we were working on before. You know, here's another area where I might want to do a little cleanup here. So we're going to clean that right there. Now again, we'll go to the point edit, cut by line tool, excuse me, and we're going to choose now the guideline, and that just slice this little end point off and give us a nice sharp angle there. And let's just check this one more time. Make this 5.5 by 1.5. Okay, so this gives us our profile that we're going to sweep. Now the size of the part we wanted to use was 30 7/8. So let's come here and just go to the arc tool, and we'll draw a 180-degree sweep section, and we're going to make this 30.875. Okay, so we have our inner radius where we want it, and we have our profile, which is 5.5 inches wide and 1.5 inches tall. Let's see, just off a hair, so I'm just going to make this just the exact size, barely noticeable, but just wanted to make that the right size. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this inner radius, I'm going to offset it the entire distance of this profile, and I'm also going to create a center line in between the two, just to make it easy to extrude this profile. So we'll come here and we see here that 2.75 times 2 is 5.5. So I have the total distance here will be the correct distance, and since I've made this 2 lines, I cut that in half for the distance, and I also am creating a center line here. So I've got the total profile length as a cross section with a line in between those 2 lines. Now I'm going to extend here. Let's just extend a little bit this middle profile, just to make sure we go all the way past that part when we're making a 3D piece. And I'm going to close off the ends here, and that's going to give me the outer radius and the inner radius for this part. Now the next step will be come here to go to the surface menu and create a relief, and here I'm just going to apply a flat, no thickness relief. Now I'm going to go back here again, and I'm going to extrude a profile. With this relief selected, I go to extrude. It tells me to select the contour I want to extrude, which is right here. Select the path I want to follow, which is right here. I'm going to add this onto my existing relief. There's no base, there's no scaling or rotation, no mitered corners. I'm going to change or make sure that the bottom middle of my selected profile in this diagram here is going to sweep along this path, and once I have that, I can hit my green check mark, and I have created the path here. And we see the profile was swept along this way. If I wanted to change the direction of, or what was the inside or outside, I could mirror this central profile, or I could reverse the direction of this contour. But the profile could be changed to any desired profile, and this process would be the same. Now, one important consideration here is, I noticed you said you might have some different profiles. If I go and I change the inner radius, I'm changing the outer radius and the relationship between these two. So there is no parametric scaling here. If you want to make something a different size but keep this profile the same, you will need to re-extrude this for each side part, but it's quite an easy process to extrude something. So now let's get rid of this, and we have our part. I'm just going to hit Control C here, and let's go to a new layer. And let's say this is a 4x8 sheet layer. Okay, I'm going to paste this part to my active layer, and somehow I lost just a little bit of height there. All right, now I'm going to take this part, and we need to apply the toolpath to it. So it's going to be an island fill toolpath, and the first one will be the rough pass. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to choose a 3/8 inch end mill, and I have saved one that can go a little deeper per pass if I want to do that. And I'm going to choose it's 1.5 inches, so we'll say 1.3 for this tool. And we're going to allow this to go 0.2 past the edge. This one I'm going to offset from the surface 0.2 inches. We'll keep the overlap at 90, one pass. Enter some values here for the feed rates, and we'll hit OK. All right, now we can see that we have applied the toolpath. Oh, one thing I forgot to do while looking at this is I forgot to move this into the plate first. All right, so we're going to come here and move this into the plate. Now let's reapply the same toolpath, and EnRoute will remember what I just applied there. Alright, so here's my rough cut. Now I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to, with a ball nose tool, let's choose a 1/4 inch ball here, 1.5. I don't need to go quite that far with the overlap. That's the only reason why I did this as a separate toolpath instead of just doing them both in one. I wanted to use a different overlap, and both an overlap and an overcut. But the overcut, you can only have one per file, and I wanted a separate overcut value for the rough and the clean. So that's why I'm using two separate toolpaths here. You can typically go a little slower if you want on a controller, but not always faster, so I'll set it a little bit higher than I might want to go. Alright, and here's the overcut amount, and if I want to have a different overcut, then I need to apply a separate tool. Now if I like both of these tools together, and actually if I'm also going to do a cutout on this one, okay, so we're going to go to cutout or routing offset, and let's use that same tool. I'm going to use the long one, and we're doing a cutout here in 2 passes. And actually we can do this as an onion skin pass, because the first pass is going to mostly remove material that's already gone there. So we have an onion skin there. And now we've got an output toolpath on here as well. Now then, I'm going to simulate this. So let's move this over here. And I'm going to move this to, just by selecting everything and hitting Control 1. And while we simulate this, I'm going to fit the selection to the plate. Now we can do a simulation here. We're going to have our order be the strategy first. We got the island fill and the offset. Then we went to 3/4 for the ball nose tool, and that looks good. We'll go to the first tool change, and we should see that first tool change is going to rough this out, and that end mill is going to follow a 3D surface, so I should notice these little steps in here, which I do see, the little steps that flat edge tool will create as it's producing this surface. Alright, now the next tool is going to be our detail tool, and it's going to actually produce our surface of the profile. I used a 1/4 inch tool. It's possible you might be able to use a 3/8 tool, or want to have more detail and use a 1/4 tool, and that might determine whether more rough passes were needed or not. But in this case, I felt only one would be needed. And then finally, the last tool here is the cutout with the same tool we used to rough it with. So here we could see that we would create these parts, and this tool path should work quite well. A couple things we're going to take a look at here. Okay, so let's turn off, and I'm going to go to the view menu, view setup, and for a second let's just turn off toolpaths. We know they're there, but I don't want to have to redraw that all the time. So I'm going to go to this plan, and I have these 3 tools here. I can save this as extruded parts, and now I'd be able to apply all 3 of these toolpaths in one by applying one plan to a selected contour. It's something that might help for future applications where you're going to do the same exact cut. Right, so that's one thing to mention here. Another is I'm going to come here and make my part size bigger, my plate size bigger. And because EnRoute bases these on 2D contours, I can now come in here and say I want to, let's do 5, 6, 7 of these. I want to nest the original. We'll allow up to 90-degree rotation. And we're going to hit apply. And that's allowed us to just make a few copies of this part. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Because I'm actually nesting these, even though they're 3D parts. And I do have the toolpaths applied here. We'll just draw our 0.1875 radius. And we'll see that these pieces are going to have no trouble fitting on here. So that's one of the nice things about using EnRoute for something like this, is because we treat the 3D objects as 2D objects, you can nest them together. Alright, so here we have our nested pieces being cut out of a sheet. And again, if you wanted to create new size parts, you'd need to go through this extrusion process again, but that would still be a pretty easy process. It does not take long to extrude something like that.